Hello again. I'm here again, back for this very important session. We are in the energy sector, in the Energy Day, but one of the main issues of discussions in the last year was about open strategic autonomy, how we are vulnerable, how this transition will ask for new materials and new manufacturing and acceleration in these components that will need a response. So we are at the COP28. As we were mentioning at the starting of the session with Director General with ITE, we will want to see that at this COP we will have this tripling of renewable objectives and doubling energy efficiency, and that will require a vast amounts of new mineral and new manufacturing capacities, and that's very important. I would like to share with you that as the International Energy says, and we have here the International with us in this amazing panel, we are entering in a new industrial era. This new industrial era, it's more about how we make this transition happening at the same time, energy transition with the industrial transition. This means that we will change for a fossil fuel, as you can see in this figure, intensive economy to a material intensive economy. This figure is from 2021, as you can see. In 2019, the global trade or energy-related products have a main winner, oil. But in 2050, if we stick with the net zero scenario, which we win and we want to in this COP 2028, look for that specific objective, it's completely different. We will look at critical minerals. We will look at newcomer. It's hydrogen, green hydrogen, of course. And you will see that oil is just a teeny tiny space, or probably we won't need it if we also continue working in this innovation stuff. So, of course, things are changing, and another important aspect is that the demand of critical raw materials for wind, solar, for low emissions generation, for grids, for batteries will be higher and higher. Just from now to 2030 can be 2 to 7 times more if we think about lithium, rare earths, and things, many different elements. So we need to be prepared. And just to give you brief comments about what we are doing in the European Union. In the European Union, we suffer from this crisis a lot, and we feel that we were vulnerable in terms of energy dependency, but also we were vulnerable in terms of value chains for this transformation, and we wake up and see that we are also vulnerable in terms of what we want for the future in critical raw materials. That means that we were very active, and we start thinking about this Green Deal have to be bigger, and think about that Green Deal is for industry, it's for economy, and it's also for climate change. So the Industrial Green Deal was approved and presented in February this year, 2023, where you can see 4 main pieces. The first one is about the regulatory environment. The second one, it's about faster and access to funding. The third one is about skills, because we will need much more skills in the short run for this transformation. And the last one, that's very important, is open trade for resilient supply chains. Let's be concrete in the first one, in the regulatory environment. We've been working in 3 main elements. The first one, that hopefully we will have a good result during this month, December, it's the market design, market reform. We are working so hard during the Spanish presidency, and hopefully we will have, as I was mentioning, a good final deal in the coming weeks. The second piece that you can see there is the Net Zero Industrial Act. The industry will need many things now, and we would like to see that at least 40% of the manufacturing capacity that will be needed for this transformation have to be based in Europe. And that's very important. That's make us less dependent in the future. And the third piece, obviously, is the Critical Raw Materials Act that we have an agreement just 1 month ago, so we have a very good news in the negotiations during the Spanish presidency. So these are the main pieces that Europe are working. But I would also want to share that when we start the presidency back, it seems far away, but just some months ago, back in July 2023, we were very clear about what is one of the main pillars for us. And one main pillar is the open strategic autonomy. What does it mean that? That means that we need to think about how value chains can be built in Europe. But also we need to think about what kind of alliances we can build with other countries. Because we know what we have some elements, but other ones will be needed for third countries, and we need to build that confidence and trust for the future. So we produce a document. It's there. It's a good example of the main actions that we foresee for this open strategic autonomy, but not just in energy, also in health, in digitalization. And there are some important elements like looking for fostering domestic production, fostering circularity, because it's not just about doing new things, it's also about how circularity can play a main role in this transformation. And also think about replacing raw materials by alternatives. So we need to think about, once again, sorry, I repeat myself, innovation have to be also at the core. And of course, I think the most important thing that we have today is this excellent panel that are joining me today. So we have Germán Granda, CEO from Forética. Thank you and welcome to the Spanish Pavilion. Christophe Maclay, Head of Energy Supply Unit at the International Energy Agency. Thank you very much for being here today. The agency is doing a lot around these open strategic autonomy and critical raw materials. I was lucky to join you just 2 months ago in a very important ministerial meeting in Paris. Philip Cole, Director of Industrial Affairs of Wind Europe. I think Wind Europe, you have the experience about how important it is to have resilient supply chains in Europe and in each country, trying to build this big transformation. And of course, Noam Bosidan from World Economic Forum. Thank you very much for being here with us. He's a friend from the past, and he has a huge experience in this conference of the parties. So welcome to the fourth of you, and let's start this, sorry. Oh, I think I missed one. So thank you very much for being here to talk about this very important topic today at this conference, which I think I was mentioning, this resilient, in this case EU, but resilient globally, it's very important. I think all countries are thinking about how we can build a confident atmosphere in this acceleration of the energy transition. Let me start with Christophe. Thank you very much. You know that in Europe, the extraction, there's very few. I mean, we don't have much capacities in terms of critical raw materials. They are very limited. What strategies from your side, from the international, do you foresee in order to have this autonomy and be less dependent in the future?
Certainly. Thank you very much. And thank you very much on behalf of the IEA for the invitation to come and speak on this topic. As you said, it really is it is a crucial one. We had a meeting not too long ago in Madrid, a climate summit, where we focused on this importance of tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency. And energy efficiency is in of itself a very important part towards resilient supply chains and resilient energy secure future. But on the renewable side, one of the aspects that was discussed a lot at that summit was, are we just sacrificing energy security to other countries? Europe has suffered a lot because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and we don't want to see another repeat where we are highly vulnerable to energy security impacts. So what can Europe do? I mean, it's true, of course, that Europe does not have many of the raw critical minerals itself, but that's not the only part of the supply chain. There's also the processing, the manufacturing of those critical minerals. Today, the vast majority of that is located in China. It's actually significantly more geographically concentrated in one country on the processing side than we see for any other energy commodity. For oil, OPEC has a large share of the market, but it's nothing compared to what China has of the supply chains of the processing of critical minerals. And so Europe shouldn't forget that it has a lot of experience and technical expertise in that area, in smelting, in refining, for example. It has already had that expertise, but it needs targeted financing support to make sure that we have that more onshoring of that capacity. Providing affordable, low emissions electricity will be another important part, and nurturing the skills that are required to process those minerals. So those opportunities to maintain and support and strengthen the midstream will be very, very important. But it's not just about the supply side of the equation. There's an awful lot of focus on the supply side, but we shouldn't forget about demand side things that can be done as well. So there's a huge potential there to unlock the power of technology on innovation, on recycling, any technologies that can reduce the material intensity or enable material substitution could help moderate that demand that we see in the future and bring about a lot of benefits to European countries. And there, recycling in particular has multiple benefits. It reduces that need for virgin materials, it reduces the need for mineral imports, and there are also, I should say, large environmental benefits to recycling. Right now, given the location of a lot of the processing of minerals, it has a higher environmental impact than it would need to do so if it were to be located in Europe. So there are great opportunities there. We are seeing a number of countries that are making progress in this, but we need more action. We need more policies. We need more government support if we are to be able to properly capture that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Germán, sustainability has been part, as we listened from the session before, of business decision making. But now we have a new element coming, that is this open strategic autonomy, how we can build these value chains and these all what is needed for this transformation coming with sustainable, safe and sustainable sources. So how the private sector is including this vision?
Well, first of all, thank you very much also for having Foretica today in this fantastic Spanish pavilion and with this relevant panel and with these colleagues. As you may know, Foretica is the Spanish Business Council for Sustainable Development with a membership of more than 200 companies representing a variety of industries such as energy, food, infrastructure, among others. And we work with Spanish companies to accelerate their sustainability journey. And we also try to engage value chains across our membership to accelerate green industrialization and support the just transition. Answering your question, we have a very important initiative in Spain called the Cluster for Climate Change, where large companies are collaborating to share and learn from one another. And this year, the initiative has focused on energy transition programs, which are crucial to not only decarbonize by 2050, but also to ensure an open strategic autonomy. These companies are mainly focusing in 4 pillars on energy transition. Those are, of course, energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification, and security, meaning the diversification of energy sources. About the opportunities you were asking, I think it's first, it's the ability to expand and accelerate sustainability. Each company in Spain that is in their energy transition journey creates a collective support to the net zero European goals, the Green Deal, but also, of course, to the Paris Agreement, and specifically to the Spain's National Integrated Plan for Energy and Climate. But we need to remember that less than 50% of public companies in Spain have meaningful transition plans to achieve net zero emissions before 2050. So we definitely need to elevate ambition on their energy goals. And as you mentioned, companies cannot act alone, and up to 90% of a company's impact on its environment occurs indirectly through the activities of its supply chain partners. Therefore, if companies want to move forward on their ecological transition, they must identify opportunities and solutions with the supply chain. You mentioned materials, circularity, etc. Let me finish by saying that, of course, we need to move faster. That's why we have supported with the partners here in Spain and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development the launch of the Climate Drive in Spain to assess the readiness of organizations on their decarbonization journey and the steps companies need to take to embark on their net zero journey.
Thank you very much. Philippe, just 1 month and a half ago, the Commission presented something very important, the wind power package, with an action plan, with a vision, also a communication around the offshore wind. We know that for transition there's a key pillar, wind sector, of course, and the innovation around that the sector, wind sector, have been European from the past, and we want that to still in the future. That's why we have concrete objectives in Fit for 55. We have ambition from the governments. But I would like to ask you, what do you think have to be the also commitment to strengthen the supply chains from project developers?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Secretary of State. It's great to be here. I think to start the answer, the European wind supply chain and the European wind industry has been a success story to date. You know, this has been massive innovation to get to where we are today, and without the innovation, we would not to be seeing the successes that we are. But today, the supply chain is struggling in Europe, and we know that. You know, we're in a situation today where we're seeing increased competition from non-European manufacturers, China, who are offering turbines at prices that European manufacturers cannot compete with, and in many cases under OECD rules they are unable to offer the same deferred payment terms. So there is no level playing field, and we really thank you and your team for the leadership you've shown here to see how we can tackle this. Indeed, in the Wind Power Action Plan, it sets out 16 steps that the industry needs to continue to be a success story, covering areas around permitting, skills, financing, very important elements as well, and funding elements. And we're starting to see already the changes that are needed being put in place. So we've seen the European Investment Bank now offering counter guarantees to manufacturers, for example. Now, on the developers' side, the developers are shouting for more clarity. They want to see where the auctions are going to be taking place. They want to see what auction models will be in place. And across Europe, as you'll know, we've seen a real patchwork recently, unfortunately, of different auction models starting to take place. You have the generally accepted and very good two-sided contracts for difference in many countries, but we have started to see in some countries, like Denmark and Germany, the perils of negative bidding starting to show its head. And of course, what this does is it puts additional costs on the developers, which will slow down their wider rollout plans for renewable energy projects, but it also puts additional pressure that the supply chain don't need on the supply chain. And I think the developers are now saying, look, let's work together, industry and governments, to map out the future of wind energy auctions. Let's do further plans ahead to give that clarity for the investment cycles. And let's really think about, coming back to the supply chain elements, we as Europeans, where do we want our turbines to be manufactured? This is the point we're at now. And picking up on the energy security points my previous colleagues have already made, we are in a situation today where within 1 to 2 years we risk significantly losing manufacturing capacity in Europe that the developers need unless we see a stringent approach to how we tackle the challenges. And I think the Wind Power Action Plan will go a long way to addressing that, along with the Wind Energy Charter that will come to support it. And we're really looking forward to seeing the discussions on the Wind Energy Charter, which again will massively help the developers see the commitments from governments for that plan.
Thank you very much. And, you know, we are working in this Wind Energy Charter, and hopefully it will be a good result also during this December, in the coming weeks.
Indeed, indeed.
Okay,
A
Noam.
Christmas present, no less.
Yes, we are the presidency and we are willing to have the best as we can.
Excellent.
Noam, thank you very much for coming. And for me, it's really a pleasure to have you here. But also, I would like to stress that for the global community, having every year this global risk report, it's very important. For me, it's a big reference, which I always waiting to see as the starting of every year. So thank you very much. Energy transition, we were mentioning, will require lots of new materials. What will be the main geopolitical impacts on this transformation? What do you foresee?
So first of all, thank you very much. It's also a great pleasure to be here, obviously. Thank you for the kind introduction. I do have a bit of experience of the COPs. I don't have a lot of experience of the risk report. And so that allowed me to kind of dive a bit deeper into it. And you'll see, I'll speak to that image in a minute. But, you know, the World Economic Forum, we're the international organization for public and private cooperation. So essentially, we're a platform for collaboration and for generation of insights. And typically, the risk report falls into that category. It's one of the key reports we publish on a yearly basis. What does it look like? It basically looks at what are the key potential risks underpinning the economy in the short term and in the long term. And so first of all, I think there's this kind of time dimension here that you have a look at, which is pretty interesting. It's underpinned by two things. One is the risks perception survey, and there you have more than 1,200 experts, you know, from the risks advisory board, the chief risks officers community, academia, business, government, you know, a strong suite of experts looking at, okay, what do we believe is coming, and that's kind of longer term. And then on the other hand, you have this executive opinion survey. This is the private sector for a lot of it. And then you have more than 10,000 people who are being interviewed and who are asked the question, okay, what do you believe is the key kind of upcoming risk in the region where you are over the next 2 years? And that picture that you have here is basically, and I'm hoping that you can see to some extent, is the picture from the 2023 report. It's usually published around our Davos annual meeting, so in January. So it's almost more than a year old, and you know we're going to get published the next one in January 2024. And the picture varies from year to year, which is what I guess you highlighted in your question. It's interesting to see the evolutions. So January 23, what you had on top was cost of living for a short-term perception risk. But then obviously, if you look at the longer term, the four you have, there are categories, so you can see the green colors, are basically environmental related risks. Failure to mitigate climate change, failure of climate change adaptation, natural disasters, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse. These are present in the 2 years, but in a slightly kind of inverse order. And I think to me this is extremely illustrative of kind of where we are today. So the question you've asked, and the potential answer actually, which also lies within the 2023 edition of the risk report, is, you know, what are some of the top risks? And you know, we forged this expression of a potential polycrisis, which essentially is how does one of those risks potentially kind of accumulate with the other to create something which is even bigger than the sum of the individual parts, and that's something we all want to avoid. So think of the energy crisis we faced last year. This was mostly at the beginning an affordability issue rather than an availability issue per se. Now, if you combined it with cyber, with geopolitical, this could have become availability rather than affordability. And that's where the role of policy becomes extremely important. Repower EU, the Green Deal Industrial Plan, now today the Open Strategic Autonomy concept. All of these things, you know, sometimes we wonder, what does the European Union do? What is the use of policy? Policy precisely helps you to avoid these things and to make sure that one doesn't add up to the other, so that we can remain in a manageable context. So it's a challenge, but hopefully policy helps us take care of those challenges and, you know, help us deal one-on-one with those issues rather than kind of the sum of these all. So.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I think we need to avoid this polycrisis, but also we need to avoid this failure of the battle against climate change, of course. That's why we are here at the Conference of the Parties, and hopefully all together can give a global response. Christophe, I would like to ask you one specific question, because you have presence around the world, so you have information from countries, from policies and measures, and I think that's very important. So you have very valuable information to foresee what kind of alliance, cooperation and collaboration activities should be built from now to the future in order to avoid this kind of poly-crisis in the future?
I think if we take a quick step back and look at picking up on some of the things, points that Philip made on Europe has made mistakes in the past when it's come to energy security. One was a very heavy reliance on Russia for gas. Another was letting go of its first mover advantage when it came to solar. Europe was one of the very early movers in solar, and it yielded that advantage to other parts of the world. We don't want to see a repeat of that in the future when it comes to wind, when it comes to some of these other areas. One of the results of we are seeing from the global energy crisis is a coming together of policies on energy security, on decarbonization, and on industrial strategy. And so one of the things that we have been highlighting is there are a number of industrial strategies that countries in Europe can adopt that would help to encourage the development of some of these new supply chains and make sure that it doesn't lead to future risk going down. So we've mentioned already, of course, the importance of supply-side policies and thinking about locating manufacturing facilities domestically where possible. There's also a very important role for sending the right market signals on a demand side. So making sure that if a company makes the leap to develop a manufacturing plant, that there will be some demand for that. We're seeing some risks for that on hydrogen. You mentioned green hydrogen. At the IEA, we don't tend to color our hydrogen in that in the same way as that, but we are seeing a huge amount of emphasis being placed on low emissions hydrogen on the supply side, but not the same right now on the demand side. We need to see more action on the scaling up the demand for low emissions hydrogen. When it comes to critical minerals, for example, we can get lessons from other parts of the world. Australia, for example, has what it calls its critical minerals facility, which is about helping to develop critical minerals projects domestically within Australia. In the United States, they have a loan programs office, which is helping to support and provide loans and loan guarantees to clean energy projects, which can help to address some of the shortfalls that there are in financing for new clean energy projects. Another very important aspect for governments is to look at support for clean energy demonstration facilities. You mentioned the importance of innovation, and there is a need for new demonstration plants. In 2022, last year, we saw a number of governments coming together, close to $100 billion of support for clean energy demonstration projects. If all of that funding comes together, that will give a tremendous boost towards the commercialization of these emerging technologies. A final area to consider for countries in Europe is on supporting recruitment, training, and accreditation programs. Offering government support for those programs is one of the key ways to boost the availability of skilled labor that's needed for these new technologies. If we look at some of the other examples around the world, Canada, the Albertan government there is supporting the retraining of coal industry workers for employment in other sectors, including mineral minings. And that offers dedicated funding, it offers programs such as the tuition voucher scheme, and that provides financial assistance to help those workers access secondary education so that they can relocate into these areas. So there's a number of different areas that European governments, European countries can look to other parts of the world to help boost support for its own domestic supply chains.
Thank you very much. On that final response that you were given about experiences, how to make new skills and training for working in thermal plants or in mining, things like that. I think in Spain we have a great experience with our just transition strategy, with our action plan. It's part of also our recovery plan. It's a specific issue and measures that we'd like to really strengthen. And I think it's also part of a success story that we will also share with you later on during this session. So thank you very much. And I will jump to Germán. Germán, I think going once again not for governments, the private sector, what's the role? Because I think governments give the pathway, the signals, the adequate instruments in order to deliver the investments, but then we need the private sector to be there. It's a question of scale. We need them, of course. How we can reinforce this strategic autonomy and also maximize the opportunities in the territories, because one of the main elements that we are suffering in all countries in Europe is probably the opposition from the territories in terms of renewable energy transformation. So what do you foresee that can be done on that?
No, absolutely agree that to maximize opportunities in the territory, we need to focus in what our colleague mentioned about the red risks, the social risks, right, in the agenda. And we are doing. I agree. The Spanish government has done a great job in terms of just transition, right? But we need to involve more companies to identify workers who will be the most vulnerable to the green transition, offering training opportunities for workers to improve their skills for green jobs. We strongly believe that the just transition will put people at the forefront to ensure they are trained and prepared for changing work systems. But as you mentioned, we need to work with communities. And the deployment of projects that reinforce strategic autonomy of territories needs to conduct what's now called a double materiality analysis to identify companies' impacts and dependencies, not only in nature, but also in social and economic risks and opportunities. Identifying these stakeholders, material issues, is the first step, we think, to managing any potential concerns. Companies also need to have stronger action plans of response with measurable objectives to track progress. And well, that's what we're trying to do from Foretica, incorporating also not only these programs concerning training and upskilling or skilling jobs, but also nature positive programs for companies. And finally, I think we can foster the use of technology that will help companies maximizing opportunities. We know that technology is very useful now to collect large amounts of data quickly, analyze information, predict future scenarios, and also help companies to be transparent. And for example, at Foretica, we recently launched an initiative called AI on ESG, so it's artificial intelligence on environmental, social, and governance issues, and to push companies to understand not only economic potential, but also help companies identifying potential risks, monitor them, and accelerate their sustainability plans.
Thank you very much. And Philippe, we were talking about how we want the wind sector to continue being competitive and big pillar in industrial sites, but also in generation side in Europe in general. So what are the main challenges that in the short run, I mean, in the coming 3 years, you see in the European wind industry, onshore and offshore?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I mean, we have 7 years now to 2030, 7 years. And one thing I'm going to chuck in maybe to also link in with your answer there was I saw this very interesting poll recently for a European country where they asked 2,000 citizens of these top 5 government priorities, which of these 5 would you be prepared to lower in priority if the budget didn't allow us to address it? And more than 80% of those polled, 2,000 people, said the energy transition. So for me, that's a major concern, because we can't do the energy transition, we can't make this work unless we bring the people along with us. That will be the biggest blocker, I think, ultimately. But in terms of sort of the industry itself, we need to make sure there's probably 5 key areas that we get right, and the Wind Power Action Plan certainly goes a long way to do this. The first is around permitting. Getting permitting right, onshore and offshore wind. So today, it still amazes me that in the vast majority of cases, a permit application for a wind farm or a solar farm is still paper-based, based on paper. right? So it gives very little transparency. And what happens with paper? It gets lost. Somebody leaves it on their desk. It loses a month or two in terms of the permitting process. So we have to look at digitalizing the permitting process. The European wind industry is working on a system with a number of different organizations called easy permits, which we are currently trialing in a number of European markets with local permitting agents. And we've had some very good feedback where it takes the average permitting time for an onshore wind farm from about 18 months down to 3 months. So that's a significant step forward, bearing in mind, again, 7 years to the targets. The second area is around investment in the grids. You know, we all hear this phrase now, there is no transition without transmission. I do like this phrase, but we need to make sure we know where we're building the grids, we know what we're building it for, and we know that when it's the wind farm or the solar farm is going to be built, that it can be connected and it can get to where it needs to get to. So that's the second most important point. The third point, as my colleague has already mentioned, is around trade policy. We've been so reliant on third countries outside the EU for too long on this, and we really need to see some very fast step forwards to diversify our supply chains. We don't want to risk an energy crisis 2.0 at some point if we can't get hold of these components. The fourth is around auction design. I mean, I've already highlighted this really, but making sure we have clear auction models that developers know that when they're bidding into projects or they're getting ready to bid into auctions, they know what that auction model will be. We know that it's commercially sustainable, and importantly, that it's index linked. Because we've had many situations in the past couple of months, even in the UK, for example, and in the US, where large offshore wind farms have essentially been cancelled because they can't make the prices work anymore. And the final one is around skills and employment. So if we just look at offshore wind, for example, there's currently in Europe around 77,000 people who work in the offshore wind sector. If we get to 2030 and we're close to hitting our targets, we will need 250,000 people to be just for offshore wind. So the question is, where are these people going to come from? So there's a big job here we have to do around upskilling, building apprenticeship schemes again across Europe, encouraging people to see the wind industry and wider renewables as an exciting place to work. And it is an exciting place to work. I work in renewables and I really enjoy working in renewables. Hopefully you can see it, despite my very sore feet from many days of walking around COP. But I think making sure that we get the clear messages on the employment opportunities around renewables, because renewables aren't going to go anywhere, it's just going to become a bigger industry and it's an exciting place to work. Yeah.
Philip, you are a great ambassador for this.
Thank you.
So you are delivering that message today here with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very clear, 5 issues we need to tackle. Noam, once again, going to the experience and the work that you are delivering from geopolitical perspective, how you foresee all of us can reduce dependencies in the future and create stable economic signals in order to avoid this risk that you saw to us just before.
Well, so first of all, I think we need to come up with better catchphrases like "no transition without transmission." Yes. So I didn't know it, and I really like it. But 3 very, very quick points. One is, I think, the kind of exercises that we've led right now, typically with the risk report, just like taking a bit of time and looking ahead, planning, foresight type of exercises and analysis is actually useful. Again, sometimes you get a question, but this is like fiction or whatever. It's not. It's really trying to just take a step back and trying to understand, okay, what do we perceive are the key risks, because that allows you to plan ahead. So just, do more planning is probably the first one. The second is, with regards to the way you do planning and the way you then start to develop potential solutions, develop solutions in a way that is integrated. So what we've done in the past is basically, okay, we have a food issue, let's work on food. We have a potential energy transition issue, let's work on potential energy transition. But actually, and you said it quite strongly, in particular with the energy crisis, we've now started to see the fact that, well, we have policies that are linked to both energy security, decarbonization, industry transformation, all of this together. Because it makes no sense to look at them separately, because at the end of the day, if you do develop them separately, you end up with one being the bottleneck of the other. And so integrated solutions in the way you do that planning is I think, a critical point, to ensure that stability. And then the third thing, and I was just looking at the open strategic economy concept, is and I guess this may be a bit contentious, but I think open strategic autonomy doesn't necessarily mean Europe should just do the way, Europe should just stick with European things. We can and we should continue to develop partnerships, in particular with third-party countries that we can rely upon and trust. So the other day, again, serendipity of COP, I happened to facilitate a panel at the Greek Pavilion, which was highlighting one of, I think, a great project, which was called GREGI, which is an electrical interconnector in between Egypt and Greece. And it's a significant project. I mean, I just took a couple of numbers: 3,000 megawatts capacity, 1,000 kilometers long cable, $3.5 billion investment, made the PMI list of the European Commission projects of common and mutual interest, to be included in REPowerEU potentially. This is significant. So it's a great link we have, or we are developing as the European Union, with a strategic partner, in that case Egypt, but that is going to significantly contribute to achieving a number of our objectives, including security, including sustainability, including electrification, including tripling renewables. I mean, it's all there, right? So we need to be careful in the way we create those partnerships. We need to not put all of our eggs in the same basket, but we should continue to pursue these, because that's the way we're going to be able to achieve our objectives and stability.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. For me, it was a pleasure to have you, the four of you, together and to talk about this very, very important issue. I'm sure we will continue discussing how strategic autonomy, how value chains management, the new facilities in countries, how we need to invest, how fast we need to go, how alliance we need to build, how business sector needs to produce the adequate signals. At the same time, governments provide the planning. I'm sure the agency will also have a leading role in this critical raw materials activities and many others. So thank you very much for being here in the Spanish Pavilion, and I'm sure we'll meet you pretty soon. Thank you. Thank you.